Chapter 4. Lottie. If Sarah had been a different kind of child, the life she led at Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for the next few years would not have been at all good for her. She was treated more as if she were a distinguished guest at the establishment than as if she were a mere little girl. If she had been a self-opinionated, domineering child, she might have become disagreeable enough to be unbearable through being so much indulged and flattered. If she had been an indolent child, she would have learned nothing. Privately, Miss Minchin disliked her, but she was far too worldly a woman to do or say anything which might make such a desirable pupil wish to leave her school. She knew quite well that if Sarah wrote to her papa to tell him she was uncomfortable or unhappy, Captain Crewe would remove her at once. Miss Minchin's opinion was that if a child were continually praised and never forbidden to do what she liked, she would be sure to be fond of the place where she was so treated. Accordingly, Sarah was praised for her quickness at her lessons, for her good manners, for her amiability to her fellow pupils, for her generosity if she gave sixpence to a beggar out of her full little purse. The simplest thing she did was treated as if it were a virtue, and if she had not had a disposition and a clever little brain, she might have been a very self-satisfied young person. But the clever little brain told her a great many sensible and true things about herself and her circumstances, and now and then she talked these things over to Ermengarde as time went on. "These things happen to people by accident," she used to say. "A lot of nice accidents have happened to me. It just happened that I always liked lessons and books, and could remember things when I learned them. It just happened that I was born with a father who was beautiful and nice and clever, and could give me everything I liked. Perhaps I have not a really good temper at all, but if you have everything you want and everyone is kind to you, how can you help but be good-tempered?" "I don't know," looking quite serious. How shall I ever find out whether I am a really nice child or a horrid one? Perhaps I am a hideous child, and no one will ever know just because I never have any trials." "Lavinia has no trials," said Ermengarde stolidly, "and she is horrid enough." Sarah rubbed the end of her little nose reflectively as she thought the matter over. "Well," she said at last, "perhaps that is because Lavinia is growing." This was the result of a charitable recollection of having heard Miss Amelia say that Lavinia was growing so fast, and that she believed it affected her health and temper. Lavinia, in fact, was spiteful. She was inordinately jealous of Sarah. Until the new pupil's arrival, she had felt herself the leader in the school. She had led because she was capable of making herself extremely disagreeable if the others did not follow her. She was domineered over the little children, and assumed grand airs with those big enough to be her companions. She was rather pretty, and had been the best dressed pupil in the procession when the Select Seminary walked out 2 by 2, until Sarah's velvet coats and sable muffins appeared, combined with drooping ostrich feathers, and were led by Miss Minchin at the head of the line. This, at the beginning, had been bitter enough, but as time went on, it became apparent that Sarah was a leader too, and not because she could make herself disagreeable, but because she never did. "There's one thing about Sarah Crewe," Jessie had enraged her best friend by saying honestly. "She's never grand about herself in the least bit, and you know she might be, Lavvy. I believe I couldn't help being just a little if I had so many fine things and was made such a fuss over. It's disgusting the way Miss Minchin shows her off when parents come." "Dearest Sarah must come into the drawing room and talk to Miss Musgrave about India," mimicked Lavinia in her most highly flavored imitation of Miss Minchin. "Dearest Sarah must speak French to Lady Picton. Her accent is perfect." She didn't learn French at the seminary at any rate, and there's nothing so clever in her knowing it. She says she didn't learn it at all. She just picked it up because she always heard her papa speak it, and as to her papa, there is nothing so grand in being an Indian officer. "Well," said Jessie slowly, "he's killed tigers. He killed the one in the skin Sarah has in her room. That's why she likes it so. She lies on it and strokes its head and talks to it as if it was a cat." "She's always doing something silly," snapped Lavinia. "My mamma says that way of hers of pretending things is silly. She says she will grow up eccentric." It was quite true that Sarah was never grand. She was a friendly little soul and shared her privileges and belongings with a free hand, the way by mature ladies aged 10 and 12 were never made to cry by this most envied of them all. She was a motherly young person, and when people fell down and scraped their knees, she ran and helped them up and patted them, or found in her pocket a bonbon or some other article of a soothing nature. She never pushed them out of her way or alluded to their years as a humiliation and a blot upon their small characters. "If you are four, you are four," she said severely to Lavinia on an occasion of her having, it must be confessed, slapped Lottie and called her a brat. "But you will be 5 next year, and 6 the year after that. And," opening large, convicting eyes, "it only takes 16 years to make you 20. "Dear me," said Lavinia, "how can we calculate?" In fact, it was not to be denied that 16 and 4 made 20, and 20 was an age the most daring were scarcely bold enough to dream of. So the younger children adored Sarah. More than once she had been known to have a tea party, and a tea party made up of these despised ones in her own room, and Emily had been played with, and Emily's own tea service used, the one with cups which held quite a lot of much sweetened weak tea and had blue flowers on them. No one had seen such a very real doll's tea set before. From that afternoon, Sarah was regarded as a goddess and a queen by the entire alphabet class. Lottie Lay worshipped her to such an extent that if Sarah had not been a motherly person, she would have found her tiresome. Lottie had been sent to a school by a rather flighty young papa who could not imagine what else to do with her. Her mother had died, and as the child had been treated like a favorite doll or a very spoiled pet monkey or lapdog ever since